I want to be a Jedi.
Then you must have the courage to tell the truth.
Hey, everybody, welcome back to the channel. We're here to talk episode number 3 of The Acolyte. Just premiered on Disney Plus yesterday. Hayden, welcome. Happy summer. It looks hot there.
It is very hot here. We're having, it's like 82 today, which isn't super hot, but I'm in an attic with no AC. And I'm a Buffalo kid, so I'm not really used to this kind of weather. So we'll see.
Yeah, totally understand. Well, Godspeed. Hopefully, you're doing okay by the end.
Looking very shiny today.
Yeah. Well, hey, tis the season for that. Yeah, it's warm here too. We had tornado warnings last night.
Oh, geez.
So that was really fun and exciting. So anyway, it's Acolyte episode 3. So, the good news is, Hayden, that this show hasn't brought out the worst in people at all. Everybody's very
opening
calm
up the
and measured.
Sarcasm.
Yeah, I mean, that's for our Inside Out review later. But everybody's very calm, measured in their takes on this. I feel like it's just,
Yeah.
So what are people going to be pissed about this time? What do you think?
I think the lack of competent men in this episode is going to upset some sides of the fandom. And I think there's a use of the Force that's very unique, interesting, and definitely going to ring divisive.
What do you think about that? Because we run here, so we get the backstory here, right? About how our two main characters were split up. We go back to the event that was referred to in the first 2 episodes, and we see, their family and their upbringing, and they're essentially in one of these groups that sort of, recognizes the Force as something different than the Force, right? And they look at it differently. They, I don't want to say worship it differently, but
they call it the tether, right? And they're more so about observing it and recognizing it and having faith in it rather than using it physically to do things within the world, which I thought was a really unique and interesting and cool read of the Force, and I think is a cool little lore thing that expands the world a bit.
And it is true to the High Republic for people that haven't read that. Like there's on Jeddah, there is a council of different religions, so to speak, that look at what we know as the Force differently. And so this is one of them. The Path of the Open Hand and the High Republic books is another one. They were the bad guys. This one not so much, but it is a different perspective. But I do agree with you. I think it's going to get a few people worked up. What do you think overall? I mean, last time we gave a score right away, and that got people rage commenting quickly, so we'll do it again. Last time we gave the first 2 episodes 7.5? Is that what we did? Yeah,
as a combined premiere.
Yeah, clearly that was unacceptable, so we will go with now this time we didn't like episode 3 as much. I liked it okay, but yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I thought it was fine, and I kind of learned to live with it eventually, but my issue was, I think, and I am a person who I always try and go into things just accepting them for what they are, taking them at value and not putting my own expectations into it, right? As much as I can remove myself in that way. But as soon as the episode started and it was a flashback episode and it revealed itself to be a flashback to this specific moment, I was sitting there and I was like, please don't be the whole episode. Please don't be the whole episode. And it was. And I think this is one of those instances where I think the pacing of it was just really weird. I don't know if this flashback needed to be an entire episode. And if you were going to do this, I don't think the episode after the premiere is the right time. I think you could have either held off on this to build some more mystery later, or you could have intercut these scenes with episode 1 and 2 and whatever the 4 we end up getting is, right? That being said, there's been a lot of really reactionary takes online of people are not people are not being kind to the creators of this episode, and I would
So
not go
surprising.
that far. Yeah, right. I don't think this was awful. I didn't hate it. I don't think it ruined Star Wars or broke my childhood or anything, but I didn't really enjoy it, and it didn't feel super necessary to me.
Yeah, I liked it okay. I probably liked it a little bit more than you, but I still didn't love it. So we'll get the score out of the way right away. We gave it a 5.5. It is not great. I
Yeah, it's like right
now
between mediocre and okay on our scale.
yeah, now everybody out there that's like finally, we don't hate it probably for the same reasons that a lot of other people do, but we'll get to that. So what didn't sit well with you outside of the like flashback angle?
So I think the episode itself was just paced really weird. It was kind of slow, and I think it's really hard when you have a story in anything that's relying so hard on child actors.
Yes.
And I think there were moments where these kids were really good and they had a really good dynamic, and I believed the banter, I believed the energy between the two of them, right? Especially oddly enough, like they were really good at bickering with each other. um and I don't know if it's the script or if it was just one of those things where the director maybe should have asked for another take or two, but there were a lot of line reads that just like fell flat. And when I say flat, I don't mean like they underwhelmed. I mean like there was not really emotion in them. Like they were
Yes.
just kind of speaking. Um and a lot of that I think is just down to some of the dialogue is very black and white, very there's not a lot of nuance, right? I think there was a moment I chuckled at where the two siblings are arguing and the one is like, the Jedi are bad, and the other's like, no, the Jedi are good. Like,
I know.
and it was like phrased and said like that, and I was just like, oh no.
I agree. A lot of the delivery came across as almost like a table reading, like just going through the lines rather than actually with feeling. Yeah, I agree with you on the Jedi are bad, Jedi are good. When you compare a well-written Star Wars show, which in my opinion is something like Andor, to this episode in particular, it just doesn't match up for me.
Yeah.
So that's unfortunate. Now, I do still like the High Republic and getting to see these Jedi. We get Carrie-Anne Moss back.
Woo!
Did you think that was going to happen?
I figured. I had heard rumors that there were going to be flashbacks and stuff, and so I mean, the cynic in me is like, you're going to get more out of Carrie-Anne Moss because like Star Wars at the end of the day is a business, and one of the ways that business makes them a lot of money, at least historically, is merchandise. So they want to sell Carrie-Anne Moss Jedi action figures. So I knew we were probably at least going to get another look at her. But I did like her character and her performance a lot in this episode. And I think the Jedi that we saw were the highlight of the episode.
I would agree. And yeah, they come in, there's this weird, like, I don't even know what to call them. It's almost like, it's just like a, religion. Because they're not really a cult or anything like that.
I think a coven is the terminology they use.
There we go.
A coven of witches, yeah.
Yes. So I want to call it a couple things that just really stuck out to me like as bizarre. So our main character, Osha, we see her as a child with her sister, May. And Osha, like, just suddenly in this, as part of this coven that does not appreciate the Jedi at all, right? Or their approach to the Force or anything like that. Just all of a sudden, out of nowhere, she's like, the Jedi are good and I want to be one. And like, there was no, unless I missed it, there was no real logical path to that.
I could play devil's advocate for that though, because I feel like kids have really weird aspirations. If you ask a kid who's 8 years old, which is I believe the age the twins are on this episode, like, what do you want to be when you grow up? The answers are a lot of times either like really bold dreams or they're things that have no connection to them, right? And so, I mean, that's just kind of how kids are. And I think it makes perfect sense for a child in the Star Wars galaxy to hear myths and rumors about the Jedi and want to be a part of that. And I think it's also kind of a the grass is always greener on the other side kind of thing, right? Because a Jedi might think being a witch is super cool, but a witch thinks being a Jedi is super cool because it's unique, it's different, it's not
Yeah.
their lived experience.
How much of it do you think was just, that character did not want to become a witch. She was about to go through the ceremony to become one.
Mm-hmm.
And, how much of that do you think was like, I don't want to be a witch, and the Jedi becoming a Jedi is becoming not a witch, So do you
Yeah,
think
that was part I read too. Is I think she wanted to not be where she was, and being a Jedi was the path to that in front of her.
the way? Yeah. So there's that. Now, another thing you and I are a little split on. I'm not like, it's not hill I'm going to die on territory or anything like that. Like, nothing here is that serious, but it is something I did roll my eyes at hair. When we learned that, the children were born from no father. I think there's some backlash in the fandom about that.
Mm-hmm.
It does bug me too, but not probably as much as I think some other people. But you were okay with it, so why were you all right with it?
I don't know if I'd say I was okay with it. I wasn't like a huge fan of it, but I just at
Okay.
the same time, this is not the first time this has happened, right? And
Right.
like Anakin was born out of immaculate conception, right? He was born out of a mother and the Force. And we got even less of an explanation of that there and how that works. So I think like if you're gonna accept one, you have to accept the other. And I think at this point I don't love the whole like virgin birth thing or whatever you want to call it, right? But
Right.
the Force can will a life, but at the same time, with all of the other things the Force can do, it doesn't really seem out of the realm of possibility with me. I feel like the Force has always kind of been used as, I don't want to say a crutch, but sometimes in storytelling it has been used as a crutch, right? We have a problem, the Force is how we fix it. We need this character to resurrect.
Totally.
It's the Force, right? So I don't know. I've learned to live with it, I guess. And I also think that like the Force is deliberately such a mysterious, such a powerful, but such a deep thing that has all these layers and all these sides to it in different ways that the string can be pulled. So I think to assume that we have seen everything the Force can do in 60 years of history by one or two groups of people is kind of just a limiting assumption.
Yep, I would agree with all that. The and it is totally a crutch to fill plot holes sometimes. Like, how many times have the words "the will of the Force" been said to explain away something like ridiculous?
For sure.
My issue with it is that Anakin was meant to be kind of special in how powerful he was and what he represented and all of these things. I mean, he's the chosen one.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we might learn that these twins have something similar to that, but my guess is no, because like, why would one not be, a Jedi anymore, or things like that, if all that was the case? I don't know, but we'll see.
Yeah.
I just, liked. I didn't like the angle then, like in Phantom Menace when it happened. I rolled my eyes like so hard. But
it's weird and kind of
but
unnecessary and bad.
I can accept it if it's like just that character and it really sets him apart in terms of being this chosen one, right? Now we did get, like, for those of you before you start yelling at us that are into the comics, like Darth Vader issue number I think 25 addresses how Palpatine basically manipulated the Force and midichlorians to, conceive Anakin. So Palpatine is essentially Anakin's daddy. So there you go. So that means like Luke and all of them, they're all Palpatines too. So hooray. But
which makes Rey and Kylo kissing really weird.
It does, but it's no weirder than, Luke and Leia making out in Empire. So it's fine.
But they didn't know at the time. Anyway.
That's true. Well, yeah, but the other ones didn't know either. So
whole nother video.
Yeah. Star Wars incest, behind the scenes. We'll get into that later.
It's a theme. That's the thread. That's the thread that they're talking about.
There you go. Right. So, special call out here before we look to wrap up. Dean Charles Chapman, you get the award for you're the first person to be a king in Game of Thrones. King Tommen and a Jedi in Star Wars. So
Congrats,
good for
King.
you. Yeah. Good on you.
Golf clapping under the table.
And he wasn't like aged in this episode. We actually got to see like him.
Yeah, that really freaked me out. I was like, did they cast an actor who like was it two separate actors for the different time periods or what the deal was? So it was the prosthetic makeup or whatever they did to him in episode 2 was pretty cool.
Yeah, for sure.
It worked.
So where are you hoping they go from here? Like, we're a little over a quarter of the way through. We're coming up on the halfway point actually next week. So where do you hope we go from here?
I just am excited for like the murder mystery of it all, right? I want to get back to that present timeline. I liked the energy of that. I'm firmly a member of the Yord Horde, so having a whole episode without Yord was really difficult.
Yeah.
So if we can get back to that storyline and just learn about those characters and explore and learn the Force with them. I don't know. I'm still along for the ride. I understand why the creators felt this episode was important. I don't think we learned a lot of new information, to be honest. I feel like we got a little more context for what we already knew. And honestly, some of what we learned, like, I think made certain character motivations worse. If I can go on a micro rant here.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought the dynamic of Osha and May was actually pretty interesting in the beginning half of the episode, because it was basically this coven of like mostly older women, right? There are no children. They've never even seemingly like met other kids in their life. And so Osha and May have this very strong bond because they're the only people who are living as children there, right? So they stick very close. And May doesn't want Osha to leave because she doesn't want to be alone. She doesn't, and she's lashing out and she's getting jealous and selfish and, being like, what's wrong with you? And, doing everything short of cussing her out, right? For wanting to leave and wanting to be with the Jedi. And I thought that was a really interesting motivation and dynamic, right? Was just that like she did not want to be left alone. And as a child and as a very sheltered one at that, like didn't have the emotional maturity to understand the complexity of the situation and love by letting go, right?
Yep.
That all made perfect sense to me. So then when you get to the moment where it's like she shows up to her bedroom, May shows up to Osha's bedroom and is like, I'm going to stop you from leaving. Like, and she's like, you can't tell me what to do. And she's like, no, but I can kill you. I was like,
right? Yeah.
What in the fuck? Like, it just doesn't make any sense, because her whole motivation of not wanting Osha to leave wasn't about anything. Not that she was against the Jedi. She didn't care about betrayal. She just didn't want to be alone. So I don't understand how attempted murder would solve anything. And it just goes to like, I don't know. It's just, I feel like it's making evil for the sake of evil. You know what I mean? It's like we didn't need this to buy that we know that she has an edge. We know that she's a dark side user. I don't think we needed to see her like act completely irrationally to buy that. And it's like when you get a lot of damage to the character to me.
Yeah, I agree. It's like when you get the stereotypical, like, creepy boyfriend who's like, if I can't have you, no one can, but but they applied it to 8-year-olds and it was just really weird. I'm with you on that.
For sure.
So
I have one more gripe. I'm sorry.
Yep. Go for it.
So this is a problem I feel like we've been seeing with Star Wars a lot. And you mentioned this on the last episode, how a lot of times a lot of Star Wars is so thematically similar that if you're consuming several things, it starts to feel really samey. And you had brought up specifically the example of a child who is failed by the Jedi, grows up to hate them and becomes an antagonist. I feel like what happens a lot of times, especially with like this interconnected several projects happening at once kind of MCUification of Star Wars, is that you have these moments where it's like people all kind of realize together or at the same time, like this concept or this era is unexplored in Star Wars. And it would be so interesting to explore. and then everyone explores it at once and it's not interesting anymore.
Right.
That
Yeah.
happened with the era between episode 3 and 4. We went from knowing nothing about that era to seemingly
Like everything.
every
Yeah.
story for a couple years
Mhm.
was set there. And like witches in Star Wars, like the Night Sisters, or
Oh,
just
yes.
anybody who uses the Force outside of the black and white Jedi Sith understanding was used to be such an interesting and novel and fascinating concept. And it's like all of these creators, all of these projects realized that at once, but there wasn't any oversight at the top to be like, this person's already doing this, so you're stepping on their toes a little too hard.
Mhm.
Because at this point, Tyler, in just over a calendar year, in 13 months, we have gotten 4 stories about Jedi witches in Star Wars. We got
Mhm.
Tales of the Jedi episodes. There's Night Sisters in the Jedi games. The Night
Mhm.
Sisters featured really prominently in the Ahsoka show.
Yep.
And now we have
And
another
now
coven
this.
of witches. And it's just, I don't understand how you let this happen, frankly.
It's just so copycat, and it's like, oh, somebody did witches and fans like that, so you know what? Let's do witches. And it's I agree. I think
Yeah.
they bring some of the criticism onto themselves.
Hmm.
Excuse me, with decisions like this. Like the galaxy is so vast. There has to be other things you can explore. There just
Hmm.
has to. Like, I don't understand why we have to keep repeating these themes. And if we're repeating themes to show commonality, like common threads, and then bring it all together at some point in like actual consequences for the Jedi Order, like that would be something. But that's not going to happen. So
Probably not. And I, at the same time, I don't think this is any individual creator or producer or showrunner or writer's decision, right? I think a lot of times
right.
what happens is there's this concept called, I think, like parallel development or something, right? Which is
Mhm.
that two people with no connection to each other at all make very similar stories or very similar themes or ideas just because they have a lot of shared life experience, right? So they're pulling from that. And so their art ends up being similar.
Mhm.
And I feel like I could very well see it happening at some point that like, because the Acolyte has been in development for a really long time. We've known
Yeah.
about it for longer than any of those other projects I listed have been released. So I
Mhm.
could very much see this being a situation where just things aren't coming out in the order they were meant to, or even with the pacing apart from each other they were meant to, and that's why this feels so weird. But just like, I don't know, it's getting to a point where as a fan, I feel like we've had this conversation off air, right? About like not everything is for everybody, right? And so I
Right.
think
For sure.
Disney recognizes that, and I think they're very deliberately offering very different types of Star Wars stories across all
Mhm.
sorts of media, so that even if you're not watching everything, every year, every 6 months, whatever the cadence is, there will be something for somebody. But I think you get to a point with that thinking where if you're somebody who watches everything, it almost feels like you're being punished for doing that, where the experience is
Yeah.
lessened by seeing the whole picture, which is never how it
And
should be.
yeah. And the thing is, like, so from that standpoint, right? Like, we'll just use like witches as an example. So we explore witches in other shows, and it's like cool. Now, if we continue to explore witches in another show, fine, great, wonderful. If we kind of pick up where we left off and then learn more, but we don't, we sort of go back to the beginning and relearn just from a different perspective. And that is what's frustrating.
Mm-hmm.
Last thing I'll say before we wrap up is, one thing you mentioned that it's not like they're all getting together and planning everything out, and I wish they would. Uh,
Yeah.
so the High Republic, the one thing the High Republic does super, super, super well is all the writers get together in like little retreats and plan out whether they are novel writers, young adult, comics, whatever, and map out what's going to happen step by step by step by step. And it makes for a coherent story that's all connected. You feel like everything you're reading adds to the overall story and the narrative.
Yes.
I wish that would happen here. And it's not like everything has to be like one thing leads into another, into another, into another, but just have an idea of the type of stories you want to tell and how to tell them, because it still feels like the sequel trilogy where it's like everybody do what you want, have fun.
And I think for television, especially TV shows set within different genres and different eras of Star Wars at this point too, I think that can be okay, and I think that can be fine,
Sure.
and I think that can work. I just feel like it's a lot of it is the marketing and messaging about it, right? Because
Mhm.
I feel like the Star Wars TV shows were always meant to be supplementary. Were always meant to be extra, right? They weren't the very top highest tier of Star Wars canon. That was always supposed to be the films. But where the kind of this mismanagement has led to us being in a drought of films right now, where these shows are being looked at as like the pinnacle, the prestige moment of Star Wars, and I don't
Yep.
think they should be treated that way. I think it's almost more. I feel like what Disney's trying to do is more akin to the Legends model, right? Where it's like there are all
Mhm.
of these stories. You don't need to read everything. A lot of them are self-contained. Some of them will cross over, some of them won't, right? But I think the messaging on that has been really unclear, and we're getting to this point where like I don't know who these shows are for because like
Yeah.
you and I as Star Wars super fans and as nerds who like know and love, and especially you consume
Mhm.
everything, right? Pretty
Mhm.
much like I feel like we're not getting the full experience because a lot of this is new information to us. But then on
Mhm.
the inverse, like if a casual fan or someone who has Disney Plus because it came with a bundle of something else they paid for, someone who just likes the movies and wants more Star Wars, right? Like an
Mhm.
especially like an older fan, right? Like I think like that'd be like the generation of like our parents.
Yep.
If my mom turned on the Acolyte, I'd be getting texts from her every 5-10 minutes, like, what the fuck is going on? Who are these
Who
people?
are these people? Yep. Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's, yeah, I don't know. I don't know what the answers are. I feel like it's a whole other video, like what to do. And I don't even know if it's one video, because I just
Yeah.
feel like the franchise, for all the good things it has, is a little lost right now. And I see what you're saying about the TV shouldn't be considered like the, premium Star Wars product, but they've backed themselves into that corner. Like,
Mhm.
if you don't want fans to view it that way, then you have to not have what's going to be a 7-year gap between films.
And
You
not
just,
charge premium prices for the streaming service they're only
yeah,
available on.
right. So,
It's part of it.
yeah, I mean, you've earned every bit of it,
Mhm.
outside of the just nonsense complaining, that's
Mhm.
different and whatever.
Yeah.
But like true concerns about coherence of story and things like that, like,
Mhm.
yeah, a lot of that they've earned.
And I do
Boy.
want to leave here saying, like, I did still enjoy the first episodes a lot. There were
Hmm.
moments of this episode I enjoyed a lot, and I'm
Hmm.
still really looking forward to this show as it continues. There's so much interesting potential. I really like a lot of these characters. I'm loving living in this era of Star Wars.
Me too.
And I think that was my biggest issue with this episode, honestly, is that it was so remote and so closed off that it didn't feel like the High Republic to me. Like I feel like the majority of this episode could have just been slotted in as like
Anywhere.
any
Yep.
other Star Wars series we've gotten. And
Yep.
that's my issue, right? Is I think we were building like really great momentum and we just took a huge sidestep this episode, which just I wasn't satisfied with that direction. But I also know that, or at least I presume they're not going to do this again, right? Now we'll just be
Yeah.
on this path following this story. And I'm
Yep.
still excited to get that.
Well, also you show this mysterious figure, in the first two, that everybody wants to know who this is, and there's a lot of theories out there already. And then you just go into some flashback episode the whole next week, right? And I think people just get a little frustrated with that. And I
Mhm.
get it. So hopefully we get back on track with episode 4. But yeah, I still like the show. I'm good with
Mhm.
it. I thought, I agree with you. This week was a little bit bump in the road. So okay.
Yeah.
Let us know what you think. If it's like not absurd, and make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, all that good stuff. And yeah, we'll be back next week with another reaction to Star Wars. Also, we're about to record a reaction to Inside Out 2, so check that out. And
Mhm.
We'll have reactions to House of the Dragon season 2.
Woo!
Starting like maybe we'll record it Sunday. I don't know. We'll see, because I don't know when those hit like HBO or Max. So,
Sunday at 9. It's both at the same time.
Okay, so probably not Sunday night. Probably Monday. That'll be out. Okay. Thanks everybody. I hope you enjoyed Acolyte episode 3, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye.
You all take care.